So we are going to see inventories peaking to a record in spite of a small decline in production. And this, at the first glance, may give you an indication that, well, then things must be extremely rosy. But you have to be careful here.
Abdolreza, thank you so much for speaking with Dukascopy TV again. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk a bit about AMIS, what AMIS does, and if you could explain a little bit about AMIS to us and just tell us essentially what you do.
Well, AMIS came about, if you recall, a few years ago. We had prices rising. The markets were extremely volatile for food markets that I'm talking about, but it was also other commodities. And I think that the world leaders felt there is a vacuum. There is a vacuum in the sense that you want to get those who are experts or claim to be experts in the market to speak more or less the same language. So mixed signals was a problem. Good and timely information about some of the basic food crops were considered as an issue. So G20 leaders under then French presidency decided to establish agricultural market information system, and we are talking about 2011. What they did was quite unique, and I guess this is what makes us still quite unique in that we are like 10 international organizations that form the secretariat of this platform called AMIS, and then you have all the G20 countries, which, by the way, happen to be the biggest producers, consumers, and the traders of the four basic commodities which AMIS basically includes. It's wheat, rice, corn, and soybeans. Then they also invited 7 other countries, which are important countries, mostly rice countries, but also a number of grain producers which are not G20. Let's talk about Vietnam or let's say Kazakhstan. So altogether, we now have a quite an important membership in terms of countries and very important, let's say, lead agencies, which work on almost daily basis with all these countries, and that puts us in a rather good comparative advantage in terms of obtaining first-hand information, being able to analyze them, convey our last forecasts to the world market. Now, having said all this, since 2011-12, we know that markets have changed drastically. They are not like they used to be. Prices actually have come down. Volatility is not so much of an issue. Some people, in fact, go as far as say, well, let's say that this is all thanks to AMIS. Well, I wouldn't go that far. But what I would say is that this collaboration has definitely contributed to a certain degree of confidence in information that is supplied through international intergovernmental setups like the one that we present. Now, you're talking to me here in FAO, and the reason is that not only FAO is one of the 10 organizations responsible, but also it was decided that AMIS should be housed in FAO, and quite a good reason for it. One is that FAO has been obviously following the food markets for many, many decades. It's sort of raison d'etre, but also because here in FAO in Rome, you have a lot of other analysts, you have a lot of people who know specifically about certain countries. Food security is a big issue for FAO. So we could use some of these information that is readily available and the context that have already been set up. And this really gave us a very, very quick and I would say efficient heads up since our foundation just over 5 years ago.
So let's go and have a bit more of a specific look at the markets now, and we'll take the cereal markets as an example because it's a fairly good indicator. How can people get hold of these stocks and start to build them?
Well, cereal market is by far the most important market when looking at food security, especially from a global angle. And again, FAO has been following it, have been reporting on it, so as our other sister agencies like International Grains Council and others. But what we've done in AMIS is that through contacts with the countries, and I would say at a very high level with these countries, we've been able to, over the last 5 or 6 years, to harmonize the data. So when we talk about the global supply demand, and we are adding up countries, we know exactly what we're talking about. And even more so, the countries know what we are talking about. So there has been a lot going on behind the scene. Now, going back to your question, When you look at the cereal supply demand every month, both in AMIS and FAO, we publish what is the latest forecast for production, what's the latest forecast for consumption, for trade and stocks, and then we do some price analysis. The current market situation is such that we actually have a lot of cereals around the world. I wouldn't go as far as some people say a glut. You can never have a glut when you have so many people hungry. But it is definitely true that our supply is right above trend, let's call it, right? Now, you have this, and of course, with this comes prices. When you have a lot of supply, prices are under pressure, and surely they are. The stocks that we monitor, and that's very important, you take every country's reserves and you add them up in a consistent, correct way, and you come with what is called global stock level. And the global stock level are at record. And that is also, in a way, could be seen as positive because stocks act as a buffer. When you have a sudden shortfall here or there, the very fact that you have larger stocks could mean that you could use this, you can draw this, and that will help a lot with the global food security. However, it is very also important where these stocks are held. Would they be available to everyone? Are they always usable? And one of the emerging issues in the current season, and let me give you an example of, let's say, wheat, which is a very important food crop, is that you have production which actually is slightly below last year, but still large. But in fact, we are showing here in AMIS and FAO, we are showing record inventories by the end of seasons. And we are now in 2017 and 2018 season. So we are going to see inventories peaking to a record in spite of a small decline in production. And this, at the first glance, may give you an indication that, well, then things must be extremely rosy. But you have to be careful here, because if you were to take one important country out of the equation, that is China, you actually have a decline in the stocks. And this goes some way to explain why, unlike the other cereals, wheat market, in fact, has been rather bullish, and especially in the recent weeks when we have more news of drought and dry conditions affecting spring wheat situation in Northern Hemisphere. Now, why is that? It's because in China, you have very good crops year after another, and thanks to the policy, very supportive price policy, let's say, farmers are keep producing more and more, and this is resulting in more and more of the grain ending up in inventory. So we expecting 17 million increase year to year in the stocks in China, and this basically leads to lifting the global reserves. If you take this out, we actually have about 11 million drop in world inventories of wheat. And not only we have a drop in some important countries, important suppliers to the rest of the world, in particular the United States, where, as we know, the winter planting was already at one of the lowest on the record, if not the lowest, and the spring wheat is suffering from a drought. So we have a kind of a particular situation. The reason I'm saying all this is because we have to go a little bit beyond the statistics, beyond what we see in front of us as numbers. And what we do here in AMIS in particular is actually to explore that, to point to where we think the policymakers in particular have to pay attention. And here, although prices, as we said, are rather subdued and there may be not so much excitement going on, actually there is a lot of excitement going on with the wheat market.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned prices just briefly there at the end. With all this in mind, what are your kind of indications telling you about prices we're going to see going forward?
Well, it's one of the things we don't want to get our heads up because we certainly will get it wrong. And if we get it right, it's probably by sheer luck. Having said this, obviously, we have a lot of supplies. You're not going to get a permanent support to prices. There may be little spikes here and there, but in general, we think that the prices of the most basic food commodities are going to remain rather subdued. If you look at the very latest numbers we published, FAO every month publish a food price index, and then there are sub-indices. This is kind of considered as a sort of a quick barometer of what's happening in the food market around the world. And the latest is, yes, food price index in itself is slightly above last year. But when you look at the individual indices, be it cereals, vegetable oils, dairy, meat, and sugar, almost all of them, I wouldn't say even almost all of them, are well below the peaks that they had a few years ago. And I'm talking about 20, 30 to even 45% below, for example, in the case of cereals. So in spite of the fact that we have seen some increases compared to last year for some of these products, let's say dairy or meat or a little bit wheat, we are still well below our record level simply because we do have large supplies. Given this, and given what we know today about market outlook in the 2017-18 season, it is quite unlikely that we would get any sudden surge that would be, let's say, sustained over a period of time. But outside market developments cannot be ruled out. And the food markets, and another thing we learned through AMIS, and I would say the experience of the last 5 years proves it, that food markets are tremendously related now to the rest of the global markets for commodities, be it oil, be it macroeconomic, be it foreign exchange. And all of these markets are changing day to day. So you may know a lot about the grain market and a lot about food and weather, but if you don't know what's happening with the currencies and what's happening with macroeconomics and what's happening with the energy, well, you don't have the full picture. So me sitting here, I can tell you I know a little bit about grain. I know much less than that about others, and that's why I wouldn't put my head out. Having said this, overall, it looks like other markets are also, or at least do not seem to indicate that they are also on a very strong upward trend. So I would say that perhaps 2017-18 will be another season of relative tranquility from consumers' angle. Not a very good news for farmers, I'm afraid.
Abdolreza, thank you so much for your expertise and brilliant energy as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for watching. And if you like this and would like to find out more, be sure to head over to dukascopy.tv.